Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to announce the awards on behalf of the Committee for Scientific Affairs and Awards. We've got three to make today. The first of these is an award made jointly with the Pediatric Infectious Disease Journal for the best paper published in the last year by an ESPID member in PIDJ. And after the awardee has come up to give their presentation, the editor-in-chief, Steve Black, will be conferring the award. So we're making this award to Shamez Ladhani from the UK. Shamez, would you like to come up?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to allow me to come and talk to you about the paper that received the award. And this is not my presentation. Okay. And you all must be thinking, oh God, not another COVID talk coming up. And the truth is, I'm not going to talk about COVID. But I did want to share our experiences because it went on to show how we managed to control COVID and the pandemic for the children in the UK. And the UK was no different to many other parts of the world, and we went into lockdown very quickly. So by the end of March, the whole country was in lockdown, and really the only people out there working were healthcare workers. And if you're a healthcare professional like me, you used to come home after work and you see your children, and you think, oh, thank God they don't get as sick as the adults. And it was a really good feeling. Until suddenly you think the only children who will be exposed to the virus are the children of healthcare workers because they're bringing it from work. And that started our first study. What we did is identified friends across 5 cities across the UK, and we asked them all to recruit their friends and their families who worked in healthcare and bring their children in to have blood tests done. And we got a lot of very quick information about the risks of COVID in children, and we were able to show very quickly that children did get infected. There was a myth at the time that children couldn't get infected, and that wasn't true. We also found that the vast majority developed asymptomatic infections or mild symptoms, and they had very robust antibody responses, unlike what was being claimed at the time. But when we were doing this study, a random pediatrician from East London phoned me up and said, Shamez, I don't even know her at the time, why are you doing studies on healthcare workers' children? They are not the important ones. The schools are closed, but when they open, it's going to be chaos, and we need to understand about infection and transmission in school. And she said, look, I live in East London. I can recruit a school and we can do a lot of testing. And I said, you can't just do a test in one school because it is not representative of what's happening in the real world. And at the time, there was a GP who had just brought in her children for the healthcare study where I was. And she said, I can recruit in North London, so we can have 2 different regions in London. I said, but that's still not enough. So Joanne said, I have a friend in Birmingham who will actually recruit some schools as well. So then I thought, okay, I have a friend in Derby and he can recruit some schools as well. And before you know it, we had colleagues in Oxford and even a virologist in Manchester who said, you know what, this is a really good idea. We will find our local teams, we will go into schools and we'll do the studies that you want us to do. So on the 1st of June, when the primary schools opened in the UK, we already had a protocol in place to recruit children for swabs and blood tests and as many other tests that you can think of inside school settings. And this was only possible because we had an incredible study coordinator who ran the whole study for us. And between June and December 2020, we recruited 138 primary schools between the 5 doctors that were taking part. And we did weekly swabs in 89 schools every week. And we did blood samples in schools and swabs in 49 schools. And we recruited more than 12,000 students and staff over that period. And our first paper on COVID, and this is called the SCID study because it's school kids basically, and they thought it was really funny because kids go with skid marks, so they kept cracking up every time we went to school. But it was the first in primary school, and then when the schools opened in September, we had to go do the same things in secondary schools, and we did a lot of studies with every wave because everybody believed that the different waves would have different effects on children. Something that I'm particularly not very interested in, but we realized very quickly that the pandemic was an exceptional situation. We collected a lot of information on their attitudes and perceptions and fears of the teachers, the parents, the adolescents, the preventive measures and whether they worked or whether they were doable, the staff well-being and so on, so that we have information that if we have to do this again in the future, we have an understanding of what the staff think, and what the people think, and what the children think. We were also very lucky because of the work we were doing. We connected with an incredible immunologist in Birmingham. So all the samples we were collecting could be tested by the immunology department. And what was really cool is they were able to do all these complicated graphs that I still don't understand, but look really good in your presentations. And they kept publishing and publishing and publishing, because once you give them blood samples, they get obsessed with it and they keep testing. And it's really great because you don't even have to pay them. But I think one of the most exciting things we did is every time we took a blood sample, we took a finger prick, we took a swab, we took an oral fluid. We did as many tests as we could so we could try and develop less invasive tests. And we developed an oral fluid assay for SARS-CoV-2, which actually turned out to be really good. So we had videos that were played in classrooms when we went into the class. And all these children would do the swabs by themselves from 3 years up to 15 years. They would do an oral fluid swab, and then they'd have a blood test, and we'd collect all the samples. And we were able to develop and validate an oral fluid sample, which we then use on a mass scale across the country. And we were able to do national and regional seroprevalence studies in thousands of children across the country in the second year of the pandemic. But the study that won the prize was actually some work done by our nurse called Felicity Ayano, and she was looking at the blood samples that we had collected in the first pandemic wave. And she was able to show very nicely that kids who got infected in the first wave actually had very robust antibodies that lasted a long time, and they provided cross protection against the wild type infection, alpha and delta variants, but they provided limited protection against beta variants. And we didn't have that information at the time, so it was very relevant in terms of their risks in school. So on behalf of Felicity Ayano and the SCIDS investigation team, and on behalf of the children that took part in this study, I would like to thank the organizers for the award. Thank you.